This is also on Spotify now. Tonight, you are setting out along one of Europe's most remarkable pilgrimage routes, following the Camino de Santiago across quiet villages, rolling farmland, ancient bridges, and peaceful mountain paths that have welcomed travelers for centuries. Together, you'll discover how countless ordinary footsteps gradually shaped one of history's most enduring journeys. Before we begin, take a quiet moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if these slow, relaxing journeys through history are genuinely something you enjoy. And if you'd like, let us know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Now, dim the lights, settle in comfortably, and allow the modern world to quietly fade away as our journey begins. The first hint of morning arrives not as light, but as a gentle coolness that lingers on the stone beneath your feet. The village around you is still quiet, its narrow lanes holding the night's calm a little longer, while a faint mist settles over tiled roofs and kitchen gardens. Somewhere nearby, a rooster calls once before falling silent again, as though even it understands there is no need to hurry. You stand with a simple walking staff resting lightly in your hand, facing a road that countless others have followed long before your arrival. It stretches westward across the kingdoms of medieval Iberia toward the distant city of Santiago de Compostela, where tradition tells that the remains of the Apostle James rest beneath the great cathedral. That destination lies many weeks away. For now, it is enough simply to take in the quiet beginning of the road. The year belongs to the High Middle Ages, when pilgrims from every corner of Europe leave familiar homes to undertake journeys measured not by speed, but by patience. Some walk to fulfill a promise made during illness. Others travel in gratitude after surviving hardship. Many seek forgiveness, reflection, or simply the experience of placing one careful step after another through lands they have only heard described beside winter fires. Their reasons differ, yet the road gathers them together with remarkable ease, asking little beyond steady feet and a willingness to keep moving with the rhythm of each passing day. You breathe deeply, noticing the scent of damp earth rising from fields that have already been worked for generations. Wheat bends softly beneath beads of dew. Beyond the cultivated land stand patches of oak woodland where birds gradually begin their morning songs. The air carries the faint smell of wood smoke drifting from a farmhouse chimney, promising warm bread somewhere beyond the hedgerows. Nothing demands your attention all at once. Every sound arrives gently, allowing your thoughts to settle into the same peaceful pace that the journey itself encourages. The Camino, as later generations would affectionately call it, is not a single road, but a network of ancient pathways, crossing mountains, plains, forests, bridges, and market towns. Long before pilgrims filled these routes, Roman engineers laid sections of stone roads across Hispania, linking settlements through remarkable craftsmanship. Merchants, soldiers, shepherds, and local farmers shaped other paths through repeated use, gradually forming routes that seemed almost to grow naturally from the landscape. By your time, these roads have become living threads connecting monasteries, villages, inns, and churches across northern Iberia. As you begin walking, your footsteps fall upon packed earth mixed with scattered stones, polished smooth by centuries of travellers. The pace feels unforced. There is no urgency hidden within the distance ahead. Every pilgrim understands that reaching Santiago depends less upon covering great miles than upon quietly repeating today's effort tomorrow, and then again the day after that. The road teaches consistency before endurance. A small chapel appears beside the route not long after your departure. Its walls are built from pale local stone, weathered by rain and summer heat alike. Moss grows gently between older blocks near the foundation, while a wooden cross catches the first rays of sunlight that now slip above the eastern hills. The doorway remains open, welcoming anyone who wishes to pause without expectation. Inside, candles flicker softly despite the still morning air. Their light dances across simple painted images that generations of pilgrims have paused to contemplate before continuing westward. You linger, only briefly. The silence inside the chapel feels complete enough that no words seem necessary. Another traveller kneels quietly near the entrance, his cloak showing careful repairs, stitched with thread that doesn't quite match the original cloth. When he rises, he offers a small nod rather than conversation. It is a greeting shared between people who understand that the road itself will provide enough companionship over time. Outside once more, the sunlight spreads gradually across the fields. The coolness remains pleasant, making each step comfortable before the warmth of midday arrives. Sparrows dart between hedges lining portions of the road, while distant sheep graze beneath the watchful eye of a young shepherd carrying a crook polished smooth through daily use. His flock moves slowly, never seeming hurried despite the wide pasture stretching before them. Watching them, you begin to notice how much of medieval life follows rhythms, established not by clocks, but by daylight, weather, and the change in seasons. The countryside reveals itself gradually rather than dramatically. Vineyards occupy gentle slopes where rows of carefully tended vines promise future harvests. Small orchards produce apples, pears, and figs according to local climate and tradition. Vegetable gardens surround cottages built from stone and timber, each plot reflecting the quiet labor of families who understand every corner of their land. Chickens scratch beneath fruit trees while a patient donkey stands tethered beside a low wall, carrying empty baskets that will likely return full before evening. The road bends around a stream flowing over rounded stones. Its water runs clear enough to reveal tiny fish resting against the gentle current. Pilgrims often pause here to refill wooden cups or leather water flasks. You kneel briefly, letting cool water pass over your hands. The temperature reminds you how closely every traveller depends upon natural springs, rivers, and wells. Reliable water determines where settlements grow, where monasteries welcome visitors, and where evening camps naturally gather. As the morning unfolds, you begin noticing subtle signs that countless pilgrims have walked before you. A worn stone cross stands at a crossroads, guiding those unfamiliar with local paths. Nearby, shells carved into weathered markers quietly point westward. The scallop shell has become one of the enduring symbols of pilgrimage to Santiago. Some pilgrims carry real shells attached to their satchels after completing the journey, while others wear simple wooden versions carved by local craftsmen. The shape appears often enough that it slowly becomes as familiar as the road beneath your feet. Before midday, another traveller gradually matches your pace. He is neither young nor particularly old, dressed in a wool cloak faded by seasons of travel. A broad-brimmed hat shades his face from the strengthening sun, while a leather satchel hangs comfortably across one shoulder. His walking staff bears small marks carved over many years, perhaps recording earlier journeys or memorable places. After several quiet minutes, he smiles with the easy familiarity often found among those sharing long roads. "My name is Martin," he says simply. "I have walked this route before." His voice carries no boastfulness, only quiet experience. You discover that he occasionally guides less experienced pilgrims through portions of the Camino, though he insists the road itself remains the finest teacher. Conversation rises and falls naturally between long intervals of silence. Martin points out distant monasteries, whose bell towers barely rise above surrounding forests, explaining that many provide bread, shelter, or warm soup according to their means and the generosity of local communities. The presence of experienced travelers like Martin reflects something remarkable about the pilgrimage itself. While each journey remains deeply personal, knowledge passes gently from one generation of pilgrims to the next. Which bridge remains safest after heavy rain? Which village offers clean wells? Which mountain pass should be crossed before afternoon storms become common? These practical observations become gifts freely shared, strengthening the invisible community that stretches across Europe through shared movement, rather than permanent residence. By early afternoon, the road passes beneath rows of tall poplar trees planted near cultivated fields. Their leaves shimmer softly whenever the breeze shifts direction, producing a gentle rustling, unlike the heavier sound of oak branches. The shade offers welcome relief as the day grows warmer. You notice how every pilgrim naturally slows beneath the trees, appreciating simple comfort without needing to discuss it aloud. Not far ahead stands a modest stone bridge crossing a wider river. Built with graceful arches that have endured many decades of flowing water, it reflects both Roman engineering traditions and medieval craftsmanship, maintained by local builders. Bridges such as this transformed pilgrimage routes, replacing uncertain river crossings with dependable passages that could be used throughout much of the year. Travelers pause briefly upon its center, often looking downstream where sunlight sparkles across moving water before continuing toward the opposite bank. Beyond the bridge, a small settlement appears. Smoke rises lazily from ovens where bread bake beneath thick stone roofs. The scent reaches the road long before the buildings themselves. Children carry baskets between homes, while an elderly woman sweeps dust from her doorway with slow, practiced movements. A blacksmith works within an open-fronted forge, each measured strike of his hammer ringing gently across the square without disturbing the village's peaceful rhythm. Horses wait patiently nearby while their owners exchange news gathered from roads extending in every direction. Markets in such villages rarely feel hurried. Farmers display vegetables harvested earlier that morning. Wheels of cheese rest beneath linen cloths. Potters arrange sturdy bowls, designed more for daily use than decoration. Pilgrims purchase only what they can comfortably carry, encouraging careful choices rather than abundance. A loaf of coarse bread, dried fruit, perhaps a little cheese wrapped in cloth. These simple provisions become entirely sufficient when every possession travels upon your shoulders. Martin pauses beside a baker whose family has served travelers for many years. The baker speaks warmly about the increasing number of pilgrims arriving each season from lands far beyond the Pyrenees. He mentions hearing unfamiliar languages spoken outside his shop, though gestures and smiles often bridge differences more effectively than shared vocabulary. The Camino gradually weaves together people from distant kingdoms, allowing customs, ideas, songs, and stories to travel alongside them. Leaving the village behind, you notice how afternoon light changes the landscape. Shadows lengthen beneath scattered trees, while hills reveal gentle folds hidden during the brighter hours of morning. Larks continue singing overhead, their voices carried lightly across open fields. A faint breeze cools the warmth gathered during midday, making each breath feel fresh once more. As evening slowly approaches, the road leads toward a modest pilgrim hospice maintained by a nearby monastery. Its stone walls appear welcoming rather than grand, built for service rather than display. A small vegetable garden flourishes beside the entrance, supplying herbs and greens for simple meals shared among guests. Chickens wander freely across the yard, unconcerned by arriving travelers who greet one another with quiet smiles of recognition. Inside, the atmosphere remains calm. Wooden benches line the walls. Clay bowls wait upon sturdy tables. Monastic brothers move about their evening tasks with practiced efficiency, offering fresh water, bread, vegetable stew, and places to rest without unnecessary ceremony. Hospitality has become an essential part of pilgrimage, sustained through generosity, offered by communities who understand that tomorrow's traveler may one day welcome others in return. You sit beside a narrow window while the final sunlight slips across distant fields. The meal is modest, yet deeply satisfying after a day spent walking. Around you, conversations remain soft. Some pilgrims exchange stories of roads already traveled. Others simply enjoy the rare comfort of resting tired feet upon cool stone floors. Martin quietly thanks the brothers before settling near the doorway, already preparing his satchel for another day's journey. Outside, evening birds replace those of morning. The scent of fresh bread gradually gives way to wood smoke, drifting upward into a sky where the first stars patiently appear. The road west still stretches beyond the hills, unseen for now, yet quietly waiting. There is comfort in knowing it asks nothing more tonight. Preparations for the greater journey have begun naturally, almost without notice, leaving you gently settled within the timeless rhythm of pilgrimage itself. Morning returns with quiet certainty rather than surprise. Before the first golden light reaches the courtyard, you awaken to the gentle sounds of movement within the hospice. Somewhere beyond the thick stone walls, a wooden bucket is lowered into a well with a soft splash. A door opens carefully so as not to disturb those still resting. The scent of warm barley porridge drifts through the cool air, joined by the familiar fragrance of freshly baked bread. No bell urges haste, no voice raises itself above a peaceful murmur. The day simply begins, as it has for countless pilgrims before you. You sit for a moment on the edge of your simple wooden bed, allowing your legs to remember yesterday's distance. There is a pleasant heaviness rather than discomfort, the quiet reminder that every mile now belongs to your own experience instead of another person's story. Around you, fellow travelers prepare in their own unhurried ways. One folds a wool blanket with practiced care. Another adjusts leather straps securing a small satchel. A young woman from the lands north of the Pyrenees carefully wraps a piece of cheese in linen before placing it beside a loaf of dark bread. Every movement seems measured, conserving both energy and attention for the road ahead. The brothers of the monastery welcome everyone into a modest dining room where thick wooden tables have served generations of visitors. Bowls of porridge are placed before each traveller, accompanied by coarse bread, a little goat's cheese, and cool water drawn before sunrise. The meal is simple, nourishing, and familiar. In a world where long journeys depend upon careful planning, plain food often proves the most dependable companion. Martin joins you quietly, his weathered walking staff resting beside the bench. "You learn quickly," he says with an easy smile. "Yesterday you looked toward the road. Today you prepare yourself for it." You glance at your belongings, realizing how little there truly is. A wool cloak, a sturdy pair of boots already carrying traces of dust from yesterday's path, a small leather pouch holding bread, dried figs, and a flask. The walking staff. Nothing feels excessive. Nothing seems missing. Pilgrimage encourages a gentle understanding that every unnecessary object eventually becomes another weight upon tired shoulders. Outside, the eastern sky gradually brightens. Dew still clings to herbs growing beside the monastery walls. A pair of swallows dart effortlessly above the courtyard, their flight tracing graceful circles before disappearing over nearby rooftops. Several donkeys wait patiently beneath a shelter, their panniers carefully balanced by travellers carrying supplies that cannot comfortably be borne by hand alone. A stable boy checks each harness with quiet concentration, running practiced fingers across leather straps to ensure nothing has loosened overnight. Animals play an essential role along the Camino. Horses carry those unable to walk long distances, though most pilgrims travel on foot whenever possible. Mules transport heavier loads for merchants sharing sections of the same roads. Donkeys remain especially valued for their calm temperament and steady pace. They ask for little beyond fresh water, modest feed, and thoughtful care, rewarding patience with remarkable endurance over many weeks of travel. Before departure, one of the older brothers offers a quiet blessing to those gathering near the gate. His words are gentle, rather than formal, spoken as naturally as wishing someone a safe journey through changing weather. Some pilgrims bow their heads, others simply listen. Faith takes many forms along these roads, expressed as much through kindness and shared bread as through prayer itself. The monastery slowly disappears behind you as the road begins climbing gentle hills overlooking broad farmland. Morning mist still lingers in shallow valleys, creating pale ribbons that drift above streams before the warming sun gradually lifts them away. Sheep graze peacefully upon distant slopes, while their shepherd moves among them with deliberate ease, carrying little more than a cloak, a crook, and years of quiet experience. Martin walks a short distance ahead, before slowing, until your footsteps naturally fall beside his once more. People often imagine pilgrimage as reaching one place, he says, after several moments of comfortable silence. But after enough days, you begin noticing something else. What is that? The road teaches you how to notice ordinary things. His observation remains with you long after the conversation ends. As the hours pass, you find yourself paying closer attention to details that might once have escaped notice entirely. The changing texture beneath your boots where packed earth becomes old Roman paving stones. The cooler air flowing from shaded forests compared with open fields warmed by sunlight. The distant ringing of sheep bells echoing gently across valleys. None of these moments demand admiration, yet together they quietly shape the character of the journey. By mid-morning, the Camino passes through woodland where oak, beech, and chestnut trees form a welcoming canopy overhead. Their leaves soften the sunlight into shifting patterns upon the ground. The forest carries its own collection of sounds. Birds call from unseen branches. Squirrels move lightly through fallen leaves. Somewhere deeper among the trees, a woodpecker taps steadily against ancient bark. The cooler shade encourages an easier pace. Travelers naturally spread along the path, each walking according to individual comfort, rather than remaining together in a single group. Solitude appears and disappears throughout the day without feeling lonely. Sometimes another pilgrim gradually catches up. Sometimes you find yourself alone with nothing but birdsong and the rhythm of your own footsteps for several peaceful minutes. Near a bend in the woodland path, a narrow spring emerges from beneath moss-covered rocks. Clear water gathers in a shallow stone basin that local villagers have carefully maintained. Pilgrims pause here, one after another, filling flasks while exchanging brief greetings in languages carried from across Europe. Latin occasionally bridges conversation where local tongues differ, but smiles, gestures, and shared appreciation for fresh water often communicate everything necessary. Among those resting beside the spring sits an elderly craftsman from Burgundy. His satchel contains small wooden carvings, each carefully shaped during evenings spent at hospices along previous stages of the Camino. He shows one to Martine, a simple scallop shell carved from boxwood. The road grows shorter when the hands remain busy after sunset, the craftsman remarks quietly. Martine admires the workmanship before returning it with sincere thanks. No purchase follows. None is expected. The exchange itself feels complete. As the forest gradually thins, open countryside welcomes you once again. Fields stretch across rolling hills, divided by low stone walls, built over generations from rocks gathered during cultivation. Farmers guide oxen through freshly turned earth, using wooden plows, whose design has changed only gradually over centuries. Their work appears slow by modern standards, yet every careful furrow reflects intimate knowledge of local soil, seasons, and weather. You notice that villages along the Camino often seem arranged around practical needs rather than grand plans. A church stands near the center, its bell visible above surrounding rooftops. Wells occupy convenient gathering places. Blacksmiths establish workshops where passing travelers can easily repair horseshoes or damaged tools. Bakers begin work long before dawn, so bread is ready as villagers and pilgrims begin their day. Every building serves the quiet rhythm of ordinary life. Near midday, the road reaches a modest market town enclosed by sturdy stone walls. Rather than entering immediately, many travelers pause beneath shade trees growing outside the gate. Some remove boots to cool their feet briefly. Others mend loose stitching before it becomes a larger problem later in the journey. A woman traveling from Lombardy carefully oils the leather straps of her satchel, using a small cloth carried precisely for that purpose. Pilgrimage rewards attention to maintenance. Boots repaired early prevent painful walking later. A cloak dried after rain remains warm the following evening. A cracked water flask replaced in town avoids greater difficulty across lonely stretches of countryside. These practical routines become as important as the distance covered each day. Inside the town walls, narrow streets remain pleasantly cool despite the strengthening afternoon sun. Stone buildings rise closely together, creating patches of welcome shade. Merchants display bolts of woven wool, glazed pottery, iron cooking pots, beeswax candles, and carefully folded linen. The atmosphere feels lively without becoming hurried. Buyers examine goods patiently. Craftsmen answer questions without rushing conversation. Even trade seems to follow the measured pace encouraged by the pilgrimage routes themselves. Martin leads you toward a cobbler whose family has worked beside this same street for decades. A traveller who ignores his boots, the cobbler says, while tightening several stitches on another pilgrim's shoe, usually remembers them before reaching the next town. He examines your footwear with experienced eyes before nodding approvingly. Keep them dry when you can. Leather remembers kindness. The advice feels as carefully made as the boots themselves. Nearby, a cooper shapes wooden staves into barrels destined for monasteries and vineyards. The scent of fresh-cut oak mingles pleasantly with smoke drifting from nearby kitchens. A potter arranges newly fired bowls upon shelves outside his workshop. Their earthy colours reflect in minerals found in local clay. Nothing appears ornamental for its own sake. Beauty grows naturally from usefulness. When the warmest hours of afternoon arrive, many travellers rest beneath a line of elm trees beside a small stream beyond the town. Bread is shared without ceremony. Someone offers dried apples gathered the previous autumn. Another pilgrim unwraps a little smoked fish purchased earlier that morning. Meals along the Camino often become quiet expressions of generosity. Those with slightly more share easily with those carrying less, understanding that tomorrow's circumstances may gently reverse. As the heat begins to soften, the journey continues across gently rising ground where vineyards once again become common. Workers move carefully among the rows, tying young shoots to wooden stakes while discussing the coming harvest. Wine has long accompanied pilgrimage, not as luxury, but as part of everyday life. Vineyards surrounding monasteries and villages provide both hospitality for travellers and income supporting charitable work along the route. Clouds gather lightly over distant hills without threatening rain. Their shifting shadows move slowly across fields, changing the colours of the landscape from bright gold to muted green, and back again. A cool breeze arrives, carrying the scent of wild thyme, growing among rocky outcrops beside the path. It is a fragrance that seems to belong entirely to this place, impossible to separate from the road itself. Toward evening, you and Martin reach a small bridge where several pilgrims have already paused. Instead of continuing immediately, everyone lingers to watch swallows skim low above the river, catching insects dancing just above the water's surface. No one speaks for several minutes. The silence feels shared, rather than empty. Eventually, Martin smiles. "The Camino is generous," he says softly. "It gives every traveller the same sunset, though each one arrives by a different road." You cross the bridge together as evening light settles gently across the valley. Ahead, smoke rises from another hospice, waiting quietly beyond a cluster of walnut trees. Lamps begin glowing faintly behind small windows, while the day's final birdsong gradually gives way to the peaceful sounds of evening settling over the land. Without fanfare, without urgency, another stage of preparation quietly reaches its end. Tomorrow, the road will ask only what it always has: another steady step, another attentive glance, another day lived at the gentle pace that has carried pilgrims toward Santiago for centuries. The first steps away from the hospice feel different from those of the previous mornings. Yesterday, you were still learning how to prepare. Today, the simple routines have already begun to settle naturally into your movements. Your cloak rests comfortably across your shoulders without adjustment. The leather straps of your satchel no longer seem unfamiliar. Even the walking staff has found its place in your hand, touching the ground with a quiet rhythm that soon blends with the steady cadence of your footsteps. A thin layer of mist lies across the fields beyond the walnut trees, softening the outlines of distant cottages. The air carries the freshness that comes only during the short moments between night and sunrise, when the earth has not yet surrendered its coolness to the coming day. Small beads of moisture cling to grasses beside the road, brushing gently against your boots whenever the path narrows. The monastery bell behind you rings only once. Its sound travels slowly across the valley before fading into the stillness. It is not a signal demanding attention, but a quiet farewell to everyone continuing west. The brothers have already returned to their own work. New travellers will arrive before evening, while others will continue toward Santiago, just as you do now. The rhythm has repeated for generations, almost unnoticed, yet it quietly binds every community along the Camino together. The road ahead widens as it leaves the shelter of the trees. Unlike many modern roads built for speed, this one encourages observation. It curves gently around streams rather than cutting directly across them. It follows the shape of hills instead of forcing its own course through them. Travelers accept these gradual turns without impatience, because every bend reveals another piece of the landscape waiting quietly beyond. Martin walks beside you for a while without speaking. Conversation seems unnecessary when the morning itself provides enough company. A pair of hares dart across a nearby field before disappearing among low shrubs. Above them, skylarks rise almost straight into the brightening sky, their songs growing fainter as they climb higher than the eye can comfortably follow. Not long after sunrise, you pass a small farming family already at work beside the road. An elderly man repairs a wooden fence using fresh chestnut posts. His grandson carefully gathers loose branches into neat bundles for winter fuel, while two women spread freshly washed linen across hedges where the gentle breeze will finish drying the cloth. A child pauses to watch the line of pilgrims passing by. She smiles shyly. One of the older travelers raises 2 fingers in greeting. The child waves enthusiastically before returning to her task of collecting apples that have fallen beneath an orchard tree. The exchange lasts only a few moments, yet it quietly reminds you that pilgrimage does not pass through empty landscapes. Every road belongs first to the people who live beside it. Farmers, shepherds, craftsmen, millers, and innkeepers continue their daily routines while travelers come and go with the changing seasons. As the morning grows brighter, the Camino gradually begins climbing toward higher ground. The ascent is gentle enough that conversation can continue comfortably, though everyone naturally walks a little more slowly. Looking back, you see the valley stretching behind you in soft layers of cultivated fields, divided by hedgerows and stone walls. Thin trails of smoke rise from villages now beginning their own busy mornings. Martin pauses beside an old milestone. The stone stands little higher than your knee, its carved surface softened by centuries of rain and wind. Although many of the original Roman inscriptions have become difficult to read, their presence quietly reminds every traveller that these roads carry memories far older than the pilgrimage itself. The Romans measured distance, Martine says softly, resting one hand upon the weathered stone. The pilgrims measure patience. He smiles gently before continuing uphill. The path soon enters a landscape of open meadows where wildflowers grow freely among long grasses. Butterflies drift from blossom to blossom without haste. Bees move steadily between patches of lavender and thyme, filling the warm air with a gentle hum that never overwhelms the silence. The breeze becomes stronger upon the higher ground. It carries the scent of pine forests somewhere ahead. You cannot yet see the trees, but the fragrance arrives long before the landscape changes, quietly announcing what lies beyond the next ridge. By mid-morning, the road reaches a modest stone fountain built beside a spring emerging from the hillside. Water flows continuously through a carved channel into a shallow basin polished smooth by generations of hands filling cups and flasks. Several pilgrims have already stopped. A woman from England rinses dust from her face with obvious relief. Two brothers travelling from northern France refill a wooden barrel carried by their mule. An elderly couple simply sit upon the low wall surrounding the spring, allowing tired legs a few moments of rest. No one rushes anyone else. The spring has flowed for centuries. It will continue flowing after every traveller has moved on. You kneel beside the basin, cupping cool water between your hands. It carries the faint mineral taste common to mountain springs, refreshing after several hours beneath the growing warmth of the sun. Nearby, Martin introduces you to a man named Diego. Unlike most pilgrims, Diego is not traveling to Santiago. Instead, he regularly escorts pack animals carrying flour, salt, cloth, and iron tools between market towns connected by the Camino. The pilgrims think they borrow the road, Diego says with a warm smile while adjusting the harness of a patient mule. The merchants think they own it. He laughs quietly. The truth is that the road belongs to neither. His animals stand calmly while small bells hanging from their harnesses produce soft notes each time one shifts its weight. Diego explains that many merchants plan their journeys around the pilgrimage seasons. The steady flow of travelers creates dependable demand for food, boots, cloaks, candles, walking staffs, blankets, and simple medicines prepared by monastery infirmaries. In return, merchants carry supplies that support hospices and villages, welcoming thousands of visitors each year. The Camino is not simply a religious road, it is also an economic lifeline connecting distant communities. Trade follows faith. Faith often follows safe roads. Both quietly strengthen one another. When Diego continues eastward with his small caravan, the cheerful ringing of mule bells gradually fades into the distance. You continue west. The landscape slowly changes once again. Pine forests now cover the hillsides, their tall trunks rising straight toward the sky, while sunlight filters through branches, carrying the clean scent of resin. Fallen needles soften the earth beneath your boots, replacing the firmer surface of open roads with something quieter underfoot. The forest feels cooler. Even during midday, the shade protects travelers from the strongest sunlight. Birdsong changes here. Instead of open country skylarks, you hear the deeper calls of wood pigeons and the occasional tapping of another woodpecker somewhere beyond sight. The Camino narrows slightly between the trees. Pilgrims naturally begin walking in smaller groups. Conversation becomes less frequent. The forest itself seems to encourage peaceful silence. After some time, the path opens unexpectedly onto a clearing where a small stone cross stands alone. Fresh flowers have been placed carefully at its base. No inscription explains who left them. Perhaps another pilgrim passed yesterday. Perhaps someone from a nearby village visits regularly. The absence of explanation somehow makes the gesture feel even more meaningful. A few travelers pause briefly before continuing. Others simply nod as they pass. No one lingers long. The road gently invites movement. By afternoon, the forest gives way to broad grazing land where cattle wander beneath scattered oak trees. Their bells produce slow, irregular sounds carried by the breeze across the open countryside. Shepherd dogs lie comfortably in the shade while watching over the herd with patient attention. A young shepherd shares fresh goat's milk with several passing pilgrims. No payment is requested. One traveller offers a piece of bread in return. The exchange feels entirely natural. Hospitality often appears in small gestures rather than grand acts. As the afternoon continues, clouds drift lazily across an otherwise clear sky. Their shadows move across the rolling hills almost as slowly as the travellers themselves. The rhythm of walking has now become familiar. Footstep, breath, staff touching earth, another step. The movement grows almost meditative. Thoughts come and go without demanding attention. Sometimes you notice only the sound of wind moving through long grass. Sometimes only the distant call of birds. Sometimes only the comforting certainty that the road continues faithfully ahead. Martin eventually breaks the silence. Many people expect the Camino to change them. He looks toward the distant hills before continuing. I think it simply gives people enough quiet to notice who they already are. Neither of you speaks again for quite some time. His words settle naturally into the peaceful rhythm of the journey. As evening approaches, the Camino descends gradually toward a river valley, where another small settlement rests beside an old stone bridge. The bridge is narrower than those crossed earlier in the journey. Its arches rise elegantly above clear, flowing water, where trout occasionally disturb the surface before disappearing once more beneath gentle currents. Several children sit upon the riverbank, skipping smooth stones across the water. Their laughter drifts softly through the cooling evening air. Nearby, women wash clothing against flat stones while talking quietly together. A fisherman untangles his nets before tomorrow's dawn. Life continues here exactly as it has for countless seasons, gently welcoming the steady procession of unfamiliar faces passing westward. The hospice waiting beyond the bridge is smaller than the last, cared for by a local family rather than a monastery. The building is humble, its whitewashed walls glowing warmly beneath the golden light of sunset. A climbing vine shades the entrance. Wood smoke curls upward from the chimney. Inside, a large pot of vegetable stew simmers slowly above the hearth. Fresh bread cools upon a wooden table. Simple straw mattresses line the sleeping room upstairs. Nothing appears luxurious. Everything appears sufficient. As twilight settles across the valley, pilgrims gather outside for a few quiet moments before the evening meal. The western sky slowly shifts from gold to pale violet. Swallows give way to bats beginning their silent flights overhead. The air grows cooler. Someone softly tunes a small medieval fiddle, playing only a few gentle notes before deciding that silence suits the evening better. you sit beside Martine on a low stone wall overlooking the river. Neither of you feels any need to fill the quiet. The bridge, the flowing water, the distant grazing cattle, and the slowly darkening sky become companions enough. Behind you, warm light spills gently through the hospice windows. Ahead, somewhere beyond countless valleys, forests, villages, and mountain passes, Santiago still waits with patient certainty. There is no desire to hurry toward it. For now, another peaceful day upon the Camino has been more than enough. The river beside the hospice continues its gentle conversation long after darkness settles across the valley. Its steady current glides beneath the old bridge with a sound so constant that after a time you scarcely notice it. Instead, it becomes part of the night's quiet foundation, joining the distant call of an owl, the occasional rustle of leaves stirred by a light breeze, and the soft crackling of the hearth downstairs. These familiar sounds accompany your rest as naturally as the stars accompany the sky. Before dawn, the household that cares for the hospice is already awake. The woman who oversees the kitchen kneads dough upon a broad wooden table, worn smooth by many years of daily use. Her husband carries fresh water from the river, while their elder son feeds a pair of sturdy oxen waiting in a nearby shed. Their youngest daughter sweeps the stone threshold with slow, careful strokes before arranging small bundles of herbs to dry beneath the shelter of the eaves. Watching these ordinary routines reminds you that every stage of the Camino depends not only upon those who walk it, but also upon countless people who quietly remain in one place. Their work rarely appears in written chronicles, yet without bakers, millers, shepherds, ferrymen, blacksmiths, and families willing to offer shelter, long-distance pilgrimage would become far more difficult. The road is built as much by everyday generosity as by stone and timber. After sharing another simple breakfast of bread, soft cheese, and warm broth, you thank the family before stepping once more onto the western road. The morning air feels noticeably cooler than the previous day. During the night, clouds gathered beyond the surrounding hills, and they now stretch across much of the sky in gentle layers, allowing only occasional shafts of sunlight to reach the valley floor. Martin studies the clouds for a moment. "We may have rain before evening," he says calmly. "Nothing unusual." There is no concern in his voice. Medieval travelers expect weather to shape each day's journey. Roads become softer after rainfall. Streams rise and fall with the seasons. Cloaks are woven from heavy wool because they continue providing warmth, even when damp. Preparation matters far more than prediction. The path follows the river for several peaceful miles. Willow trees lean toward the water, their long branches trailing lightly across the current. Kingfishers flash brilliant shades of blue before disappearing beneath overhanging roots. Every so often, the road passes fishermen standing patiently with simple nets or long wooden poles. Their movements are slow and deliberate, reflecting an understanding that rivers reward patience more often than haste. The Camino gradually leaves the valley and begins climbing through gently rolling country where small farms appear farther apart than before. Dry stone walls mark the edges of fields where barley sways beneath the cool morning breeze. Beyond them, vineyards cling to sunny slopes, their carefully tended rows following the natural contours of the land, rather than forcing straight lines across it. You notice that nearly every farmhouse includes a small vegetable garden close to the kitchen door. Cabbages, onions, beans, leeks, and herbs grow together in compact plots, making efficient use of limited space. Fruit trees often stand nearby, providing welcome shade during summer and dependable harvests in autumn. Chickens wander freely among the gardens, scratching patiently beneath shrubs in search of insects. These quiet details reveal much about medieval life without requiring explanation. Most households strive for self-sufficiency wherever possible. Markets provide goods that cannot easily be produced at home, yet everyday survival depends largely upon careful stewardship of land, animals, and seasonal harvests. By mid-morning, the road reaches a modest watermill built beside a fast-flowing stream. The steady turning of its wooden wheel creates a comforting rhythm, neither loud nor intrusive, simply constant. Water pours over the paddles before continuing downstream, carrying away small fragments of foam that gather briefly near the mill race. Several farmers wait with sacks of grain loaded onto small carts. While the miller works, conversation flows easily among those gathered outside. They discuss recent weather, the condition of nearby roads, and news carried by passing merchants from towns farther west. Information travels surprisingly well along pilgrimage routes. Travelers become quiet messengers, exchanging practical knowledge as naturally as greetings. The exchange feels quietly familiar, much like neighbors today catching each other up over a fence, one small piece of news at a time. The miller himself steps outside to inspect the water level before returning to his work. "The stream has been generous this season," he remarks. He runs one hand across the rough timber supporting the wheel. "My grandfather built much of this." The building has clearly been repaired many times since then, yet each generation has preserved rather than replaced it. Such continuity feels common throughout the countryside. Structures grow older, not by remaining unchanged, but by being patiently maintained. Leaving the mill behind, you and Martin continue along a section of road paved with uneven stone. Walking here requires a little more attention than upon packed earth, yet the ancient surface drains rainwater remarkably well, making it valuable during wetter months. Moss grows between many of the stones, softening their appearance without hiding the careful workmanship beneath. Before long, a group of pilgrims from northern Italy gradually catches up with you. Their accents differ from those you have heard previously, and one carries a small stringed instrument carefully wrapped in cloth to protect it from dust and rain. During a brief rest beneath a broad oak tree, he unwraps it and quietly plays a simple melody, while everyone shares bread and dried fruit. The tune is unfamiliar, yet somehow comforting. No applause follows. When the music ends, the instrument is carefully wrapped once more, and the group resumes walking. Along the Camino, songs often belong to the road itself rather than to performers. They rise naturally during moments of rest and disappear just as gently, leaving only the memory of their quiet companionship. The landscape gradually changes once again as afternoon approaches. Low hills begin giving way to broader stretches of open grassland, where the wind moves freely, without interruption from dense forests. The sky feels larger here. Clouds drift steadily overhead, casting broad shadows that travel slowly across the fields. Rain finally arrives, though only as a gentle shower. There is no dramatic storm, no sudden struggle. Travellers simply pause long enough to draw wool hoods over their heads before continuing at the same measured pace. The scent of wet earth rises almost immediately, rich and clean. Dust settles, leaves glisten, small droplets gather along the edges of grasses before slipping quietly into the soil. You notice how the sound of walking changes. Boots no longer strike dry ground with crisp firmness. Instead, each step produces a softer rhythm upon damp earth. Martin smiles beneath his hood. The road has many voices. The rain lasts less than an hour before gradually passing eastward. Sunlight returns in scattered patches, illuminating distant hills, while tiny drops continue clinging to hedges and branches. Everywhere the colours appear deeper than before. Moss becomes a richer green. Freshly turned fields darken beautifully beneath the lingering moisture. Even the air itself feels washed clean. The afternoon's final miles lead toward a broad pasture where cattle graze beneath the watchful care of several herdsmen. One elderly shepherd sits comfortably upon a flat stone, carving a new handle for his walking staff. Beside him lies a faithful sheepdog, resting with one eye half open, alert even while appearing asleep. Martin greets the shepherd by name. It becomes clear they have met during previous journeys. "You still walk west each year," the shepherd observes, "and you still watch the same hill." The old man laughs softly. It has not wandered away yet. Their brief conversation carries the easy warmth of acquaintances whose friendship has been built slowly, across many seasons, rather than frequent meetings. Before leaving, the shepherd offers each of you a small piece of fresh sheep's cheese wrapped in clean cloth. "No traveller should pass an empty field hungry," he says. The gift is accepted with sincere gratitude. Such quiet acts of kindness seem woven into the Camino itself, appearing unexpectedly, yet often enough that they gradually become part of the journey's natural rhythm. Toward evening, the road descends once more into a fertile valley where orchards stretch across gentle slopes. Apple trees, heavy with fruit not yet fully ripe, stand in careful rows beside winding lanes. Bees continue their work among late summer blossoms, while farmers inspect wooden ladders stored beneath open sheds in preparation for the coming harvest. A narrow stone bridge carries you across another stream before leading into a village clustered around a modest church. Its square bell tower rises above red-tiled roofs, serving both as a place of worship and a familiar landmark visible from surrounding fields. Children chase one another across the village green until called home by patient voices drifting from nearby doorways. Smoke rises from evening fires where simple meals are already being prepared. The comforting aroma of onion, herbs, and slowly simmering vegetables fills the cooling air. Tonight's lodging is provided by a small confraternity, established specifically to welcome pilgrims. The building is plain, yet thoughtfully arranged. Cloaks hang drying beneath a covered porch after the afternoon rain. Boots line the entrance in careful rows. Wooden benches surround the hearth, where several travellers quietly mend clothing using needles carried for precisely such moments. You sit near the doorway, cleaning your boots before they dry with the day's mud still clinging to them. The task requires only a few minutes, yet Martin nods approvingly. The road rewards those who care for small things. Outside, evening settles gently over the valley. The clouds that brought rain earlier now drift westward, revealing a widening band of clear sky where the first stars begin appearing one by one. Their quiet light reflects faintly upon the damp stones of the village street. The Camino stretches onward beyond the village, disappearing into the darkness beyond the orchards. Tomorrow, it will lead through different landscapes, different villages, different conversations. Yet its steady rhythm will remain unchanged. One step, another breath, another peaceful day carried gently westward toward Santiago. The valley greets you with a morning unlike the ones before it. During the night, the rain settled deeply into the earth, and now the fields seem to breathe a cool freshness into the air. Mist hangs low among the orchards, winding gently between rows of apple trees, before slowly lifting toward the surrounding hills. Tiny droplets rest on every blade of grass, sparkling only when the first rays of sunlight manage to slip through the thinning clouds. The confraternity house is already stirring. A young volunteer sweeps yesterday's mud from the stone entrance, while another arranges fresh loaves upon a long wooden table. Their work is quiet, almost invisible, yet every traveller benefits from it. Along the Camino, such places depend not upon wealth, but upon the steady willingness of ordinary people to care for strangers they may never meet again. Breakfast is modest as always. Bread, still warm from the village oven, is shared with honey gathered from nearby hives, a little goat's cheese, and apples picked only the previous afternoon. The sweetness of the fruit feels especially welcome after many mornings of simpler fare. The villagers seem pleased to see the harvest beginning. For them, the changing season is measured not by dates, but by ripening orchards, cooler evenings, and the steady return of migrating birds. As you prepare to leave, an elderly woman places a small sprig of rosemary into Martin's hand. "For the road," she says. He thanks her with a slight bow before tucking the fragrant herb beneath the strap of his satchel. Seeing your curiosity, he smiles. "Many people carry rosemary," he explains, as the village slowly disappears behind you. Its scent lingers longer than the memory of a night's lodging. Every so often the breeze catches the herb, releasing its clean, earthy fragrance. It mingles naturally with the smell of damp soil and fresh leaves, becoming another quiet companion on the journey west. Today's road is narrower than those of previous days. Rather than broad tracks used by merchants with wagons, this section follows older footpaths that weave gently through farmland before entering low hills. Stone walls appear less frequently here, replaced by woven fences built from hazel branches. Small wooden gates mark the boundaries between grazing fields, where sheep lift their heads only briefly as pilgrims pass. The walking has become familiar now. You no longer think about each individual step. Instead, your attention drifts naturally towards the world unfolding around you. The sound of wind passing through tall grass, the steady rhythm of your breathing, the warmth of sunlight slowly replacing the coolness of dawn. The occasional greeting exchanged with travelers approaching from the opposite direction after completing their pilgrimage to Santiago. These returning pilgrims are easy to recognize. Many carry scallop shells fastened proudly to their cloaks or satchels. Their boots show months of careful repair. Their faces are weathered by sun and wind, yet there is often a quiet calm about them that seems difficult to describe. One older pilgrim pauses as your paths cross. "You have many beautiful mornings ahead," he says gently. Nothing more. He continues eastward. His words remain with you long after he disappears over the next rise. By mid-morning, the path begins climbing more steadily toward a range of rounded hills covered in chestnut and oak woodland. The ascent requires a slower pace, though no one seems troubled by it. Pilgrims naturally spread farther apart, each finding a comfortable rhythm without feeling the need to compete with anyone else. The forest welcomes you with cool shade. Sunlight filters through thousands of leaves, creating shifting patterns across the earth. Fallen chestnut husks lie scattered beneath the trees, while squirrels dart silently along moss-covered branches high overhead. The air feels wonderfully still. Only the occasional tapping of a woodpecker interrupts the peaceful silence. Martin pauses beside a particularly old chestnut tree, whose trunk is so broad that 3 people together might barely reach around it. This tree has watched more pilgrims than either of us could count. You rest one hand against its deeply furrowed bark. Its surface feels cool despite the growing warmth of the day. Generations have likely done exactly the same. Somewhere nearby, hidden among the trees, comes the gentle ringing of a handbell. The sound grows gradually louder until a small procession appears along a crossing path. Several Benedictine monks walk together carrying baskets filled with herbs gathered from the surrounding woodland. Their dark habits contrast softly with the bright greens of the forest. One younger monk smiles as your paths briefly meet. "The time is especially good this year," he remarks to Martin. "The rain has been kind." The conversation lasts only moments before each group continues in its own direction. Monasteries along the Camino rarely exist in isolation. Many cultivate gardens, vineyards, orchards, and medicinal herbs, while also welcoming travelers seeking rest. Their knowledge of plants, farming, and practical medicine quietly supports the communities surrounding them. As the forest begins to thin, the land opens unexpectedly onto a broad upland meadow, stretching toward distant mountains. They are not yet the highest peaks of the pilgrimage route, but their blue outlines rise clearly against the western horizon. For the first time, the Camino feels truly expansive. The sky occupies nearly half the world before you. Clouds drift slowly above the open land, their shadows moving almost lazily across the grass. Shepherds tend large flocks here during the warmer months. Small stone houses dot the hillsides, providing refuge when weather changes quickly. Their simple construction, dry stone walls topped with turf or slate, reflects centuries of practical experience rather than elaborate design. You stop beside one such shelter while sharing the remaining bread from breakfast. A shepherd approaches, carrying a bundle of freshly cut firewood. His sheep graze peacefully nearby, watched carefully by 2 large dogs lying among the grass. "Many pilgrims today?" Martin asks. "A fair number." The shepherd looks toward the winding road. "They arrive like the seasons." He offers each of you cool water drawn from a nearby spring hidden among rocks. Its freshness is deeply satisfying. In return, another pilgrim shares several dried figs gathered earlier in the journey. No one keeps account. Hospitality along the Camino often flows in quiet circles rather than equal exchanges. The afternoon carries you across gently rolling highland pastures where wildflowers still bloom despite the advancing season. Butterflies drift low over patches of purple heather. Bees continue gathering nectar whenever the sun emerges fully from behind passing clouds. The wind is stronger here. It carries sounds much farther than in the sheltered valleys. You hear sheep bells from distant hillsides long before the animals themselves become visible. Occasionally, faint church bells drift upward from villages hidden beyond the folds of the landscape. Each sound reminds you that people live and work across this countryside even when they remain out of sight. As the day progresses, the Camino intersects an old Roman road remarkably well preserved despite the passing centuries. Its carefully fitted stones still provide firm footing, their slight arch allowing rainwater to drain away efficiently. Martin kneels briefly to examine one section where wagon wheels have worn shallow grooves into the stone. Imagine how many journeys have crossed here. Not only pilgrims, Roman officials, merchants carrying olive oil and wine, farmers bringing grain to market, messengers riding between distant settlements, armies, craftsmen, families beginning new lives. Every generation leaves traces, even when their names disappear from memory. The road remembers. By late afternoon, darker clouds gather once more over the western hills. This time they bring no rain. Instead, they soften the sunlight into a gentle silver glow that spreads evenly across the landscape. The cooler air makes walking especially comfortable. Conversation rises naturally among several pilgrims, now sharing the same pace. A young scholar from Paris speaks quietly about the libraries he hopes to visit after reaching Santiago. A couple from Flanders discuss the changing architecture they have admired in each region. Another traveller explains how different villages bake bread according to the grains most common in their own fields. The Camino becomes not only a road across land, but also a meeting place for ideas, carried gently between distant parts of Europe. No debate becomes heated. No voice grows loud. Curiosity itself seems enough. Toward evening, the road begins descending from the uplands into another broad valley, where vineyards cover the southern slopes. Workers move carefully between the rows, preparing baskets for the coming harvest. Their songs drift faintly across the fields, blending with the rustle of leaves stirred by the evening breeze. The village waiting below is larger than many you have visited so far. Its church tower rises above sturdy stone houses roofed with reddish tiles. A small marketplace occupies the center, though most stalls are already closing for the day. Bakers sweep flour from wooden counters, while potters carry finished wares indoors, before the cool night air settles across the valley. Tonight's lodging is Pilgrim Hospital, supported jointly by local guilds. Its courtyard is spacious enough to welcome travelers arriving from many directions. Inside, experienced attendants examine tired feet, wash small cuts, and prepare soothing herbal salves, using knowledge passed carefully from one generation to the next. You remove your boots, while an older caretaker inspects them with practiced eyes. They've served you well. He tightens one loose lace before handing them back. So, continue serving them. The advice is spoken with a smile. Nearby, Martin helps another pilgrim repair a worn walking staff by carefully binding a cracked section with thin strips of leather. Nothing is discarded before every reasonable repair has been attempted. The habit reflects a world where craftsmanship, patience, and careful maintenance often matter more than replacement. As darkness slowly settles outside, lanterns illuminate the courtyard with warm golden light. Travelers gather quietly after supper, some writing brief notes that will be carried home by merchants returning east. Others simply sit together, enjoying the cool evening after another satisfying day upon the road. Above the rooftops, the stars emerge one after another with unhurried certainty. Looking west, you cannot yet see Santiago, nor do you need to. The Camino has gently transformed the destination into something larger than a single city. It has become the countless roads, villages, forests, rivers, fields, and people that have quietly accompanied every step along the way. The journey itself has begun to feel like home. The lanterns in the pilgrim hospital burn low through the night, their warm glow fading little by little until only the embers in the hearth continue to brighten the sleeping hall. Outside, the larger village settles into silence. A dog barks once somewhere beyond the marketplace before quiet returns. The vineyards on the surrounding slopes disappear beneath the darkness, though their familiar scent lingers faintly whenever the night breeze slips through an open window. You wake before dawn, not because anyone has called you, but because your body has quietly begun to understand the rhythm of the Camino. The road teaches habits gently. Rising with the first light allows the cool hours of morning to carry much of the day's walking before the afternoon sun grows stronger. What once required conscious effort now feels almost effortless. The attendants have already rekindled the kitchen fire. Iron pots rest above the flames, warming a simple broth while fresh bread cools upon linen cloths spread across the table. One of the caretakers moves from traveller to traveller with a small wooden bowl of herbal salve, offering it to anyone whose hands or feet have become dry from days spent outdoors. The mixture carries the gentle scent of beeswax, rosemary, and lavender gathered from nearby hillsides. Martin thanks the old caretaker who repaired his walking staff the previous evening. "It should carry you many more miles," the craftsman replies with quiet satisfaction. The words reflect something you have begun noticing throughout the journey. Along the Camino, skill is measured not by creating something new, but by helping useful things continue serving their purpose. Boots are stitched again, cloaks receive careful patches, wooden bowls are sanded smooth after years of use. Nothing is hurried toward replacement. Stepping outside, you find the village still wrapped in soft blue morning light. The marketplace that bustled yesterday evening now stands almost empty. Stalls remain neatly folded beneath wooden shelters while pigeons wander across the cobbled square, searching for scattered grains. A baker opens his shutters just as you pass, releasing the unmistakable aroma of fresh bread into the cool air. Before long, villagers will begin arriving with baskets of vegetables, woven cloth, pottery, and cheeses. But, for now, the square belongs almost entirely to the pilgrims quietly making their way west. The road leaves the village through an old stone gate that has watched travellers pass for centuries. Beyond it, vineyards stretch across gentle hills, where workers are already inspecting heavy clusters of grapes. Each vine has been trained carefully along low wooden supports, allowing sunlight and air to reach the fruit. Vineyard work never truly pauses. Every season asks for different hands and different patience. The morning unfolds beneath a sky of pale silver, with only thin clouds drifting high overhead. The cooler air encourages a comfortable pace. Your breathing settles into the familiar rhythm that has accompanied so many recent mornings. Staff against earth, footstep, breath, another step. The repetition no longer feels ordinary. Instead, it creates a peaceful steadiness that seems to quiet the mind almost as effectively as the landscape itself. After several miles, the Camino approaches a broad valley where the land opens into wide meadows, crossed by narrow streams. Wooden footbridges span the smallest channels, while larger crossings are marked by sturdy stone arches built generations earlier. Water has shaped this country as surely as people have. Fields follow the natural curves left by rivers rather than resisting them. Villages rise upon slightly higher ground where spring floods rarely reach. Mills stand wherever flowing water provides dependable power. At one bridge, you find a ferryman sitting upon the low parapet, though his boat remains tied to the bank below. The bridge serves most travellers now, he says with a smile when Martin greets him, but the river still asks for a boat after heavy rains. His family has guided people across these waters for decades, sometimes using the bridge, sometimes the ferry, depending upon the season. Such adaptability feels entirely natural in this world. Permanent solutions are valuable, yet flexibility often proves equally important. Beyond the river, the Camino gradually enters richer agricultural land. Wheat fields have already been harvested, leaving neat rows of golden stubble stretching toward the horizon. Farmers gather bundles of straw into carefully stacked mounds that will provide bedding for animals through the winter months. Nearby, women collect herbs growing along the edges of cultivated land, selecting only what they need while leaving enough for future seasons. You notice how little is wasted. Even fallen branches are gathered. Even rainwater is directed carefully toward gardens. Even worn clothing finds new life as patches, bags, or blankets. The economy of medieval life is built not upon abundance, but upon thoughtful use of what the land provides. As the morning continues, the road becomes busier than usual. Pilgrims now mingle with merchants leading pack mules, local farmers travelling to market, and craftsmen carrying tools between neighbouring villages. Though each person follows different purposes, everyone shares the same roadway with quiet consideration. A merchant willingly steps aside to allow an elderly pilgrim easier footing upon a narrow section of path. A shepherd briefly pauses his flock, while travellers pass through an open gate. Small acts of patience prevent the road from ever feeling crowded. Around midday, the Camino reaches a market held beside a monastery whose stone buildings overlook the valley below. The market appears only once each week, drawing people from farms and villages scattered across many miles. Its atmosphere feels welcoming rather than hurried. Stalls display woven baskets, carved wooden spoons, iron hinges, candles made from beeswax, linen cloth, smoked fish, walnuts, apples, and wheels of cheese, resting upon fresh straw. You walk slowly between the rows, not because you intend to buy much, but because each craft quietly reveals something about the region. The baskets are woven from willow gathered along nearby rivers. Pottery reflects the reddish clay beneath surrounding hills. Woolen cloaks vary slightly in colour, depending upon local sheep and the plants used to create natural dyes. Martin pauses at the stall of an elderly map maker. Rather than producing detailed maps as later centuries would know them, the man sketches practical routes upon parchment for merchants, clergy, and noble households. His drawings emphasize rivers, bridges, monasteries, mountain passes, and dependable places to rest. He smiles when he notices your interest. The road itself teaches better than parchment. He gently rolls another completed map. But sometimes memory appreciates a little help. The observation lingers pleasantly as you continue exploring the market. Nearby, a cooper demonstrates how wooden barrels are fitted together without nails. A blacksmith sharpens farming tools while patiently answering questions from younger apprentices. Children watch wide-eyed as a travelling glassmaker displays small coloured vessels catching the afternoon sunlight. None of these people have travelled to entertain. They have simply brought their work with them, allowing everyday craftsmanship to become quietly fascinating. The monastery welcomes pilgrims into its shaded courtyard, where water flows continuously from a carved stone fountain. Fruit trees surround the garden, and medicinal herbs grow in carefully ordered beds. A monk kneels among them, trimming lavender, while another records the season's harvest in a handwritten ledger. Martin introduces you to Brother Esteban, who oversees the gardens. Our herbs travel almost as much as the pilgrims, the monk says with gentle amusement. He explains that dried mint, sage, rosemary, fennel, and chamomile are sent to neighbouring communities whenever illness or poor harvests make local supplies scarce. Long before organised hospitals become common, monasteries quietly serve as centres of practical knowledge, preserving agricultural methods, medicinal traditions, and handwritten texts. Leaving the market during the cooler hours of afternoon, you find the road gradually becoming quieter once more. Many travellers have stopped for the day, while others continue at their own pace toward villages farther west. The landscape changes subtly, the valleys grow broader, the hills rise a little higher. Small forests begin appearing more frequently between cultivated fields. You realize that the Camino rarely changes suddenly. Instead, each day's scenery prepares you gently for what comes next. The afternoon breeze carries the scent of pine again, though distant vineyards remain visible behind you. Somewhere ahead, mountain country slowly approaches. Martin notices you studying the western horizon. The land is preparing us, he says. Not preparing through difficulty, preparing through change. The roads become steeper, little by little, the forests deeper, the air cooler. Every stage arrives gradually enough that travellers hardly notice themselves adapting. As evening draws nearer, the Camino enters a village famous among pilgrims for its stone bridge built by local craftsmen generations earlier. 6 graceful arches span a broad river whose waters reflect the fading light like polished bronze. Along the bridge stand small alcoves where weary travellers often pause for a moment before continuing. You stop halfway across. The river moves steadily beneath you, carrying leaves, branches, and reflections downstream with quiet determination. It has no destination you can see, yet it never hesitates. For several peaceful minutes, no one speaks. The sound of flowing water is enough. On the far bank, tonight's hospice waits beneath tall poplar trees whose leaves shimmer softly in the evening breeze. Smoke rises from its chimney, promising another simple meal and another place of welcome. Pilgrims arrive one by one, exchanging familiar smiles with those already seated beneath the trees. The western sky glows with gentle shades of amber before slowly fading toward deep blue. Tomorrow, the Camino will lead closer to the mountain passes that have challenged and guided travellers for centuries. Tonight, however, there is only the comforting certainty of another peaceful evening beside the road, another shared table, another quiet conversation, and another grateful ending to a day measured not by distance alone, but by everything gently discovered along the way. The poplar leaves whisper softly through much of the night, their broad crowns catching even the lightest movement of air above the hospice. The sound rises and falls like gentle waves upon a quiet shore, blending with the steady murmur of the river flowing beneath the 6-arched bridge. Together, they create a rhythm that seems perfectly suited to long journeys, neither asking you to sleep nor insisting that you remain awake, simply accompanying the peaceful hours until dawn arrives once again. The eastern horizon brightens slowly behind the valley. At first, the light is only a pale silver resting above distant fields, but before long it spreads across the water, turning the river into a ribbon of soft gold. A fisherman unties his small boat from the bank, while mist still curls above the current. His movements are practiced and unhurried. Nets are checked carefully before being lowered into the water, just as they were yesterday and countless mornings before that. Inside the hospice, travelers begin another familiar routine. Blankets are folded neatly. Boots, left beside the hearth overnight to dry completely, are brushed clean before being laced once more. A young pilgrim carefully mends the shoulder strap of his satchel using waxed linen thread borrowed from another traveler. Nearby, an older woman wraps yesterday's remaining bread inside fresh cloth so that none of it will become stale too quickly. Along the Camino, every small habit reflects an understanding that comfort often depends upon attention rather than abundance. Breakfast is quiet. Thick slices of bread accompany warm oat porridge flavored with a little honey gathered from hives kept by nearby villagers. A jug of fresh milk passes slowly around the table. No one eats quickly. There is no reason to. The mountain road waiting ahead has been there for generations and will remain there long after today's travelers have passed. Outside, Martin pauses upon the bridge before leaving the village. He rests both hands upon the smooth stone parapet, looking west where the land begins to rise almost imperceptibly. "Do you notice it?" he asks. You follow his gaze. The distant hills no longer seem isolated from one another. Instead, they have begun joining into longer ridges stretching across the horizon. The mountains never appear all at once, he says. They introduce themselves patiently. As the morning continues, the Camino follows the river upstream. The current is livelier now than in the broad valleys behind you, flowing over rounded stones that send countless tiny ripples dancing across its surface. Alders and willows line the banks, their roots holding the soil firmly against the water's steady work. Every few miles, a narrow meadow opens between the trees, where cattle graze peacefully, watched over by herdsmen carrying long ash staffs polished smooth by years of use. The path itself grows narrower, winding naturally beside the river rather than crossing it repeatedly. Sometimes it climbs gently above the water, offering broad views across the valley. Sometimes it descends until you can hear every swirl of the current only a few steps away. The changing elevation keeps the journey interesting without ever feeling demanding. Bird life changes as well. Grey herons stand motionless near shallow pools waiting patiently for fish. Small wagtails dart across smooth stones beside the water's edge. High overhead, a hawk circles effortlessly upon rising currents of warm air. Each creature seems perfectly adapted to this landscape, just as generations of people have gradually shaped their own lives around its rivers, forests, and changing seasons. Before midday, the Camino reaches a modest stone church standing alone beside the road. Unlike the larger monasteries visited earlier in the journey, this church serves a scattered farming community living across the surrounding hills. Its bell tower is simple, its walls built from local granite that catches the sunlight with tiny crystals hidden among the stone. Several villagers are already gathered outside, repairing the low wall surrounding the churchyard. One carefully places fresh mortar between stones. Another lifts weathered blocks back into position. No one appears to direct the work. Each person simply understands what needs doing. Martin greets them warmly. "We have another good season of pilgrims," one man observes while wiping his hands clean. "And another season of walls to mend." He laughs gently. The road keeps everyone busy. His remark captures something quietly important. Pilgrimage affects not only those who travel, but also every community that welcomes them. Roads require maintenance. Bridges need repair. Wells must remain clean. Hospices depend upon fresh supplies. Even the smallest village becomes part of a much larger network stretching across medieval Europe. After thanking the villagers, you continue climbing through woodland where chestnut trees gradually give way to taller beeches. Their smooth silver trunks rise almost like columns, supporting a ceiling of green leaves far above. Sunlight filters through in scattered shafts, illuminating patches of fern growing thickly across the forest floor. The air is noticeably cooler here. A gentle breeze carries the scent of moss and damp earth. Every so often, tiny streams emerge from hidden springs before slipping quietly beneath the path through carefully placed stone culverts. The forest encourages slower walking, not because the ground is difficult, but because there is so much peaceful detail to notice. Bright fungi growing upon fallen logs, delicate spiderwebs sparkling with lingering morning dew, the distant tapping of another woodpecker echoing softly between the trees. Even silence itself feels fuller here. Around midday, the path widens near a clearing where several charcoal burners have established temporary shelters. Carefully stacked mounds of timber stand covered with earth, allowing wood to burn slowly with limited air until it becomes charcoal. The process requires constant attention over many days. One of the workers offers a friendly nod. The forest teaches patience better than any monastery. His face carries faint traces of soot, yet his smile is bright. He explains that charcoal from these hills travels to blacksmiths across the region, providing the steady heat needed for shaping iron tools, horseshoes, hinges, nails, and farming equipment. Even quiet woodland occupations become connected to distant villages through roads like the Camino. The climb continues during the afternoon, though never so steeply that conversation becomes impossible. Martin tells you stories not of famous kings or great battles, but of ordinary pilgrims he has met during earlier journeys. A widow who walked in memory of her husband and spent every evening teaching village children new songs. A stonemason who repaired broken steps outside chapels wherever he found them. A shepherd who reached Santiago carrying a small lamb that had refused to leave him after becoming separated from its flock. None became famous, yet each quietly left the road a little kinder than they found it. You begin realizing that history is often preserved through remarkable people, but sustained by ordinary ones. By late afternoon, the valley narrows considerably. Granite cliffs begin appearing beside the river, their surfaces softened by patches of moss and small shrubs growing wherever thin soil has gathered. The sound of flowing water grows stronger as the current quickens through narrower channels. Ahead, the Camino reaches an old mountain bridge, unlike any crossed earlier in the journey. Its single high arch spans a rocky gorge, where white water rushes far below. The bridge seems almost to rise naturally from the cliffs themselves. Martin pauses before stepping onto it. Many travelers become quiet here. You understand why. The gorge inspires respect rather than fear. The builders who shaped this crossing understood both stone and landscape, with extraordinary skill. Without such bridges, entire regions would remain separated whenever rivers ran high. Halfway across, you stop for a moment. Cool air rises from the rushing water beneath. Swifts dart effortlessly between the cliffs. The afternoon sun catches tiny droplets thrown upward by the current, turning them briefly into silver before they disappear once more. The crossing lasts only a few minutes, yet it feels memorable in its calm simplicity. Beyond the bridge, the road climbs more steadily than before. The mountains are no longer distant outlines. They now surround the valley itself. Pine forests spread across higher slopes while rocky outcrops emerge between the trees. The air carries a freshness impossible to mistake. Every breath feels cleaner, cooler, lighter. The landscape has gently prepared you for this moment over many days. Nothing has changed suddenly. Everything has changed gradually. As evening approaches, the Camino reaches a small mountain hamlet, clustered around a clear spring flowing from beneath a limestone cliff. The houses here are built differently from those in the lower valleys. Roofs are steeper to shed winter snow. Stone walls are thicker against colder winds. Firewood is stacked neatly beneath wide eaves in careful preparation for the seasons ahead. A shepherd returns with his flock just as pilgrims arrive. The sheep move calmly through the narrow lane before disappearing into sturdy pens beside the cottages. Their bells create a gentle music that lingers even after the animals have settled. Tonight's lodging is provided by a modest inn rather than a monastery. Its common room is warmed by a broad fireplace where pine logs burn with a pleasant resinous fragrance. Travelers gather around sturdy wooden tables while the innkeeper serves vegetable stew thickened with barley. Fresh mountain cheese, dark bread, and warm cider press from apples grown in lower valleys. The conversation remains soft. Outside, evening arrives quickly among the mountains. The last sunlight slips from the highest ridges while shadows settle across the valley below. When you step outside after supper, the sky has already become wonderfully clear. Without the haze of the lowlands, the stars appear brighter than at any point since the journey began. The Milky Way stretches gently overhead like another ancient road crossing the heavens, guiding travelers who know how to read its quiet patterns. Martin stands beside you for a few peaceful moments. "Tomorrow," he says softly, "the mountains will truly welcome us." His words carry no warning, only quiet anticipation. The cool mountain air settles comfortably around you as the final sounds of the hamlet fade into silence, and another peaceful day upon the Camino gently comes to rest. The mountain air holds a different kind of silence. It is not emptiness, but spaciousness. When you step outside the inn before sunrise, the valley is still wrapped in cool blue shadow, while the highest peaks have already begun catching the first pale light of morning. The distant summits glow softly above the darker forests below, as though dawn arrives there a little earlier than anywhere else. The spring flowing beside the hamlet never seems to sleep. Its clear water tumbles steadily over smooth limestone, filling a stone trough where horses, mules, and sheep drink before beginning their own day's work. An elderly woman arrives, carrying 2 wooden buckets balanced across a yoke upon her shoulders. She fills them without haste, exchanges a warm greeting with the innkeeper, and follows the narrow lane home while the village still lies mostly asleep. Inside, the smell of oat bread baking upon a flat stone mingles with the resinous fragrance of pine logs burning in the hearth. Travellers gather quietly around long tables where bowls of warm barley porridge wait beside wedges of mountain cheese. Steam rises gently into the cool room before disappearing among the dark timber beams overhead. The innkeeper notices you admiring the thick wool cloaks hanging beside the entrance. "You'll be glad of those hills today," he says, with an easy smile. They remind everyone that mornings and afternoons are not always the same season. His remark proves true almost immediately. As you leave the shelter of the village, the coolness of dawn follows you into the climbing forest. The Camino narrows to little more than a carefully worn path, winding upward between tall pines whose trunks rise almost perfectly straight toward the brightening sky. Fallen needles soften each footstep until walking itself becomes almost silent. The climb is steady, not severe, simply constant. No one speaks very much. The mountain seems to encourage quiet attention instead. You notice how your breathing gradually settles into a slower rhythm, matching the measured pace of the ascent. There is no value in rushing here. Every traveler instinctively understands that mountains reward patience far more generously than speed. The forest smells wonderfully alive. Pine resin warms wherever sunlight reaches the bark. Moss-covering fallen stones holds the night's cool moisture. Small ferns grow in shaded hollows where springs emerge quietly from beneath the earth. Occasionally, the breeze carries the sharp freshness of wild mint, crushed beneath passing boots. You stop beside one such spring where clear water gathers in a shallow pool before continuing downhill. Martin kneels first. The mountains offer many gifts. He drinks slowly before filling his flask. They simply ask us to receive them carefully. Nearby, another pilgrim gently washes dust from his face, while a mule driver allows his animals to drink one after another. The mules wait patiently, without pulling at their reins. Their familiarity with the route is obvious. They know where water can be found, long before many travelers recognize the signs. As the morning advances, the trees begin thinning. More sunlight reaches the path. Between the branches, glimpses of the valley appear far below. The villages crossed during previous days have become tiny clusters of pale stone resting among green fields that now seem almost miniature from this height. The Camino continues climbing across open slopes where hardy shrubs replace taller woodland. Juniper, thyme, and low mountain flowers spread between scattered rocks. Bees move steadily among the blossoms, despite the cooler air. The wind grows stronger. It carries no discomfort, only freshness. Each breath feels remarkably clear. A shepherd appears over the next rise, guiding a flock of sheep toward higher summer pastures. Their wool catches the morning light, creating soft patches of white against the darker hillside. Two large dogs work quietly around the edges of the flock, responding almost invisibly to the shepherd's whistle. Martin greets him by name. "You've come early this year." "The grass came early," the shepherd replies. He leans comfortably upon his crook while watching the sheep continue grazing. "We follow the mountains more than the calendar." His words reveal another quiet truth about life here. Seasons are measured not by written dates, but by grass, snow, rain, and the movement of animals. The landscape itself determines the rhythm of daily life. Before continuing, the shepherd breaks a small round of fresh cheese into several pieces, offering one to each nearby pilgrim. "The climb always seems shorter after breakfast," he says with a smile. The cheese is mild, fresh, and surprisingly cool. No one hurries away. Mountain hospitality often carries the same unhurried character as the landscape itself. The path grows steeper through the late morning, crossing broad slopes scattered with granite boulders rounded by countless winters. Tiny alpine flowers bloom in sheltered crevices where thin soil has gathered over generations. Their colors, soft purple, yellow, and white, appear almost brighter against the grey stone surrounding them. Walking now requires a little more attention. The ground remains firm, yet loose rocks occasionally shift beneath your boots. Every pilgrim naturally shortens each stride. The rhythm changes without becoming difficult. Staff, step, breath, another careful step. Far below, the river that accompanied yesterday's journey now appears as a narrow silver thread winding through the valley. Its sound no longer reaches this height. Instead, the wind has become the mountain's constant voice. Near midday, the Camino reaches a broad saddle between two ridges, where travelers have paused for centuries. A simple stone shelter stands here, offering protection whenever sudden storms sweep across the high country. Its walls are thick, its roof covered with heavy slate, held firmly in place against winter winds. Several pilgrims rest outside upon flat stones warmed by the sun. One young woman carefully removes her boots to massage tired feet. A merchant unwraps dried apples and walnuts from a linen cloth before sharing them with those nearby. Another traveler quietly studies the route descending towards the western valleys. No one seems eager to leave. The place naturally invites stillness. From here, the view stretches across miles of mountains, layered one behind another, fading gradually into soft blue distance. Forests fill the valleys between them. Tiny villages appear wherever gentler slopes provide enough level ground for farming. Ancient roads wind through every opening the landscape allows, following rivers, passes, and natural terraces formed long before human footsteps ever crossed them. Martine sits beside you upon one of the warm stones. When people speak of crossing mountains, he says, they often remember the highest point. He gestures quietly toward the valleys spread below. But the mountain is every step. You understand immediately. The climb did not begin this morning. It began days ago when the hills first started rising gently from the plains. Likewise, the descent will not truly begin with the next slope. It will unfold gradually over many peaceful miles. The Camino teaches that every destination begins long before it becomes visible. After resting, the journey continues across the pass itself. The western side feels different almost immediately. The breeze carries slightly more moisture. Ferns become more common than dry grasses. Small streams appear more frequently, fed by hidden springs higher among the rocks. Clouds drift low across nearby ridges without threatening rain. Occasionally they brush gently across the path itself, surrounding travelers in cool white mist for only a few moments before drifting onward once again. The experience feels wonderfully peaceful. The world grows quiet. The mountains seem to breathe. As the afternoon progresses, the path descends gradually into dense beech forest, unlike any visited earlier. The trees here grow taller, their smooth trunks rising like pale columns through deep green shade. Fallen leaves from previous seasons create a soft carpet beneath your feet. Birdsong changes once again. Instead of open country skylarks or riverside kingfishers, woodland thrushes fill the forest with gentle melodies that echo softly between the trees. The air smells richly of damp earth, leaves, and moss. Everything feels cooler, fresher, almost timeless. You meet a small group of local woodcutters resting beside the path while their horses graze nearby. Their wagons are loaded with carefully cut timber destined for villages beyond the mountains. One man lifts a hand in greeting. "Good weather for walking?" "And for working," Martine replies. The woodcutter smiles. Every weather belongs to someone. It is such a simple observation that everyone laughs quietly. Indeed, the sunshine welcomed pilgrims, while the recent rain pleased farmers. The mountain breeze cooled travellers, while strengthening the miller's water wheel below. The Camino continues revealing how deeply connected every occupation remains to the changing landscape. By late afternoon, the forest begins opening into broad clearings, where cattle graze among scattered oak trees. The western valleys stretch ahead, greener than those left behind. Streams sparkle through the meadows before disappearing into woodland once more. The descent feels gentle upon tired legs. The road no longer asks for effort, only attention. As evening approaches, you arrive at a monastery nestled beside a small river whose clear waters turn an ancient wooden mill wheel with quiet determination. The monastery is modest rather than grand, its stone walls partly covered by climbing ivy. Gardens surround the buildings, filled with vegetables, herbs, and fruit trees carefully tended by the brothers who live there. A young monk welcomes arriving pilgrims with the same calm warmth offered to every traveller. The evening meal will be ready shortly. His words carry neither ceremony nor haste, simply kindness. After washing away the dust of the mountain path, you sit in the monastery garden while swallows circle above the orchard. Apple trees sway gently in the evening breeze. Lavender releases its fragrance as the air slowly cools. The mountains now stand behind you. Not conquered, not defeated, simply crossed together. The western road continues quietly beyond the monastery walls, leading onward toward new valleys, new villages, and steadily closer to Santiago. For tonight, however, the journey asks nothing more than peaceful rest beneath the fading light. Grateful for another day in which the Camino has revealed yet another gentle face of its long and timeless road. The monastery settles into the night with the quiet confidence of a place that has welcomed travellers for generations. After the evening meal, the brothers carry wooden bowls back to the kitchen without speaking more than necessary. One tends the herb garden by lantern light, gathering a few sprigs of sage and mint for tomorrow's broth. Another walks slowly through the orchard, checking that fallen branches are cleared before the morning begins. Their routines seem as familiar as breathing, shaped by years of repetition rather than urgency. You remain in the garden a little longer, listening to the mill wheel turning beside the river. Water slips beneath the paddles with a gentle rhythm that never quite repeats itself, yet never truly changes. Fireflies drift among the lavender as darkness deepens, and above the monastery roof the stars gradually fill the clear western sky. The mountain pass now lies behind you, hidden by forests and distance, though the coolness carried down from the higher ridges still lingers pleasantly in the evening air. When morning arrives, the valley feels different from those east of the mountains. The air is softer. Moisture rests upon every leaf, and the grass shines with countless droplets that catch the earliest sunlight. Mist rises from the river in slow ribbons, drifting across the gardens before dissolving among the apple trees. Somewhere nearby, a rooster announces the day, quickly answered by another farther down the valley. A bell rings gently from the monastery chapel, not loudly, not insistently, only enough to remind the brothers that another day of work has begun. Pilgrims rise as well, cloaks are folded, satchels packed, walking staffs lifted once again. The familiar routines now require almost no thought. Your hands seem to know where every buckle belongs and how tightly each strap should be fastened. The Camino has quietly become your daily life. Before leaving, Brother Esteban, whom you met days earlier in the monastery gardens farther east, surprises Martin with a smile. "You have crossed the pass safely." "So have the herbs," Martin replies, noticing bundles of dried lavender hanging beneath the cloister roof. The monk laughs softly. "Everything travels eventually." His words linger as you step beyond the monastery gate. Not only people journey across these roads. Seeds, stories, songs, manuscripts, ideas, tools, recipes, and traditions all move gradually from one valley to another, carried by merchants, monks, pilgrims, craftsmen, and families. The Camino is more than a path beneath your feet. It is a quiet thread weaving together communities separated by mountains, yet connected through patient travel. The western countryside unfolds gently before you. The forests remain lush, but they gradually give way to broad meadows where cattle graze upon rich grass nourished by frequent rain. Their coats glisten in the morning light, while small bronze bells hanging from leather collars create slow, pleasant music that drifts across the valley. Stone farmhouses appear more frequently now, their walls built from grey granite gathered nearby. Roofs are covered with thick slate instead of red clay tiles, reflecting the wetter climate west of the mountains. Deep porches shelter stacks of firewood from the rain, and broad barns stand beside nearly every house, storing hay gathered during the warm months. A woman spreads freshly washed wool across wooden frames, where the morning breeze will help it dry. Nearby, 2 children guide a pair of geese toward a meadow with patient determination, though the birds occasionally seem more interested in wandering wherever they please. The road itself has changed almost without your noticing. The dry dust of the eastern plains has disappeared. The earth beneath your boots feels darker and softer, cushioned by years of fallen leaves and frequent rainfall. Wild ferns line the edges of the path. Moss grows thickly upon old stone walls. Small streams cross the Camino, so often that tiny wooden bridges have become almost as common as the trees themselves. By mid-morning, the journey reaches a quiet hamlet, gathered around a water-powered grain mill. Unlike the larger mill visited earlier in your travels, this one serves only a handful of surrounding farms. Its wheel turns steadily beneath a canopy of alder trees, while sacks of grain wait beneath a covered porch. The miller pauses long enough to greet passing pilgrims. "The river has been generous this year." He gestures toward the swiftly moving water. "The wheel has scarcely rested." Inside, the steady grinding of millstones creates a deep, comforting sound that seems almost part of the landscape itself. Fine flour drifts lightly through shafts of sunlight, entering small windows, giving the room a soft golden haze. One young apprentice carefully brushes flour from freshly ground sacks before tying them closed with hemp cord. Another oils the wooden gears using a small clay pot hanging beside the machinery. Nothing appears neglected. Everything receives quiet attention. As you continue west, Martin begins telling you about the bridges built by local communities throughout these valleys. Some were raised by monks. He points toward a sturdy crossing visible ahead. Others by merchants. A little farther on, another bridge comes into view, and many by villages working together. Unlike castles or cathedrals, such bridges rarely carry the names of famous builders. Yet generations of travelers owe them safe passage through changing seasons and rising rivers. Their importance lies not in grandeur, but in dependable service. The road follows one such bridge across a lively stream tumbling over rounded granite stones. Several women wash wool beside the shallows while chatting quietly together. Wooden tubs stand nearby, filled with herbs used to clean and soften the fibers before spinning. One of them smiles as pilgrims cross. "You've brought fine weather." Martin glances toward the blue sky. "I suspect it belongs to everyone." The women laugh warmly before returning to their work. Beyond the stream, the Camino enters a broad chestnut grove, where sunlight filters gently through wide branches. Fallen burrs lie scattered across the ground, though the nuts within have not yet fully ripened. An elderly man walks slowly among the trees carrying a woven basket. He gathers fallen branches rather than chestnuts. "Winter begins in summer," he remarks when you greet him. He lifts the basket slightly. Firewood never collects itself. Again, the ordinary wisdom of daily life quietly accompanies the journey. Every season prepares for another. Every day's work supports those still to come. By midday, the Camino reaches a lively roadside inn, where merchants, farmers, and pilgrims naturally gather beneath a large oak tree whose shade stretches across the courtyard. The innkeeper's daughter brings cool spring water to every table before anyone asks. Fresh bread emerges from the oven. Vegetable stew simmers slowly above the hearth. Travelers from many regions share the same meal while speaking a dozen different dialects. A merchant from Bruges discusses wool prices with a local shepherd. A young pilgrim from England carefully copies the name of a nearby monastery into a small notebook. Two stonemasons compare carving techniques used in different provinces. The conversations remain calm. Curiosity outweighs disagreement. The Camino has become a place where knowledge travels almost as naturally as people. After the midday rest, the road begins following an ancient Roman alignment once more. Though softened by centuries of use, portions of the original paving remain visible beneath moss and grass. Here and there, old milestones still stand quietly beside the way, their inscriptions weathered almost smooth. Martin runs his hand across one of them. Empires fade. He smiles thoughtfully. But a good road continues helping people. The afternoon passes peacefully through alternating woodland and pasture. Horses graze beneath scattered oak trees, while swallows skim low above flowering meadows in search of insects. Every few miles, a small chapel or stone cross reminds travelers that they remain upon one of Europe's great pilgrimage routes. Toward evening, the valley broadens unexpectedly, revealing distant hills covered with vineyards once again. Though the climate has changed, careful cultivation still shapes the landscape wherever conditions allow. Smoke rises gently from scattered farmhouses. Church bells drift across the fields with the cooling breeze. The light takes on the rich golden color that belongs only to late afternoon. You and Martin pause upon a gentle rise overlooking the valley. The road ahead curves gracefully between orchards before disappearing into another stand of trees. "Have you noticed," Martine asks quietly, "how often we think we have reached somewhere important? You consider the many bridges, monasteries, villages, forests, and mountain passes already behind you. And then the road continues." He nods. The Camino is generous that way. It never asks you to choose between the journey and the destination. Instead, it quietly teaches that every meaningful place is connected to another. The evening's hospice stands at the edge of a small village surrounded by apple orchards and grazing fields. Its whitewashed walls catch the final sunlight while climbing roses frame the entrance. An elderly couple welcomes arriving pilgrims with warm cider pressed from last autumn's harvest and thick slices of dark bread spread with fresh butter. Inside, the common room glows with firelight. Outside, the western sky slowly deepens from amber to violet. The orchards fall silent, except for the occasional rustle of leaves stirred by the evening breeze. Another peaceful day has carried you farther across northern Iberia. The mountains now rest comfortably behind you. Ahead lie gentler valleys, larger towns, and the roads that will gradually draw countless pilgrims ever closer to Santiago de Compostela. For now, however, the Camino asks only that you rest, grateful for another day in which history has unfolded, not through great events, but through rivers crossed, bread shared, conversations exchanged, and the quiet kindness of ordinary people whose lives have shaped this timeless road. A fitting place to leave the journey is here, where the evening has settled gently over another quiet village and the road continues west beneath a sky full of patient stars. Thank you for traveling this Camino with me. Over these chapters, the journey unfolded not through dramatic moments, but through the steady rhythm of walking, across valleys and rivers, over mountain passes, through orchards, forests, monasteries, villages, and hospices. Along the way, history revealed itself in the work of millers, shepherds, monks, bakers, bridge builders, craftsmen, and countless pilgrims whose ordinary lives quietly shaped one of Europe's most enduring pilgrimage routes. By the time you reached the western valleys beyond the mountains, the destination had become less important than the road itself. Each sunrise, shared meal, repaired boot, cool spring, and peaceful conversation became another thread in the long tapestry of the Camino de Santiago. The route was never simply a path leading to Santiago de Compostela. It was a living network that carried faith, trade, ideas, languages, architecture, hospitality, and friendship across medieval Europe. Even today, many stretches of that ancient road remain recognizable. Stone bridges still span rivers first crossed by medieval pilgrims. Roman roads still emerge beneath modern paths. Monasteries continue welcoming travelers. Scallop shells still mark the way west. The landscapes have changed with the centuries. Yet, the quiet spirit of the Camino, the invitation to slow down, to notice small details, and to find meaning in steady progress, continues to endure. As night deepens, the sounds of the village gradually fade. The last conversation drifts into silence. The hearth settles into glowing embers. Beyond the orchard, the road disappears into the darkness, waiting patiently for tomorrow's travelers, just as it has waited for nearly 1,000 years. You need not walk another mile tonight. The Camino will still be there when morning comes. For now, there is only the cool evening air, the the gentle rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of flowing water, and the comforting knowledge that some journeys remain timeless because they are measured not by how quickly they end, but by how peacefully they are experienced. Rest well. The road can wait until another dawn.